I never trusted anybody with a messiah complex. The world is too big to change single-handed.
Edgeworks Entertainment presents Short Transmissions. Stories to rocket you into space. Tonight, Sentiment Inc. by Poul Anderson. Part 4. The finale. Source, Gutenberg.org.
He sat with his feet on the table, chair tilted back and teetering dangerously, hands clasped behind his head, pipe filling the room with blue fog. It was his usual posture for attacking a problem. And damn it, he thought wearily, this was a question such as he made his living on. An industrial engineer comes into the office. We want this and that, a machine for a very special purpose, let's say. What should we do, Mr. Fraser? Fraser prowls around the plant, reads up on the industry, and then sits down and thinks. The elements of the problem are such and such. How can they be combined to yield a solution? Normally, he uses the mathematical approach, especially in machine design. Most practicing engineers have a pathetic math background, and they use 10 pages of elaborate algebra and rusty calculus to figure out something that 3 vector equations would solve. But you have to get the logical basics straight first, before you can set up your equations. All right, what is the problem? To get Judy back. That means forcing Kennedy to restore her normal emotional reactions. No, he didn't want her forced back into loving him. He just wanted her as she had been. What are the elements of the problem? Kennedy acts outside the law, but he has blocked all official channels. He even has connections extending through the Iron Curtain. Appeal to the FBI? Kennedy couldn't have control over them yet. However, if Fraser tried to tip off the FBI, they'd act cautiously, if they'd investigated at all. They'd have to go slow, and Kennedy would find out in time to do something about it. Martinez could help no further. Swarovski had closer contact with Washington. He'd been so thoroughly cleared that they'd been inclined to trust whatever he said. But Swarovski doubted the whole story, like many men who'd suffered through irresponsible congressional charges. He was almost fanatic about having proof before accusing anyone of anything. Moreover, Kennedy knew that Swarovski was Fraser's friend. He'd probably be keeping close tabs on the physicist and ready to block any attempts he might make to help. With the backing of a man like Snyder, Kennedy could hire as many detectives as he wanted. In fact, whatever the counterattack, it was necessary to go warily. Kennedy's threat to get rid of Fraser if the engineer kept working against him was not idle mouthing. He could do it, and, being a fanatic, would. But Kennedy, like the demon of legend, would grant one wish, just to salve his own conscience. Only what should the wish be? Another woman? Or merely be reconciled artificially to an otherwise intolerable situation? Judy. Fraser swore at himself. Damn it to hell, this was a problem in logic. No room for emotion. Of course, it might be a problem without a solution. There are plenty of those. He squinted, trying to visualize the office. He thought of burglary, stealing evidence. Silly thought. But let's see, now. What was the layout exactly? 4 suites on one floor of the skyscraper, 3 of them unimportant offices of unimportant men, and... Oh, Lord. Fraser sat for a long while, hardly moving. Then he uncoiled himself and ran downstairs and into the street and to the nearest payphone. His own line might be tapped. Hello? Hello, Juan? Yes, I know. I got you out of bed, and I'm not sorry. This is too bloody important. Okay, look. I want a complete report on the messenger advertising service. When? Immediately, if not sooner, and I mean complete. That's right, messenger. Okay, fine. I'll buy you a drink sometime. Hello? Jim? Were you asleep too? Sorry. Look, would you make a list of all the important men you know fairly well? I need it bad. No, don't come over. I think I'd better not see you for a while. Just mail it to me. All right, so I'm paranoid. Jerome K. Ferris was a large man with a sense of his own importance that was even larger. He sat hunched in the chair, his head dwarfed by the aluminum helmet, his breathing shallow. Around him danced and flickered 100 meters, indicator lights, tubes. There was a low humming in the room. Otherwise, it was altogether silent, blocked and shielded against the outside world. The fluorescent lights were a muted glow. Fraser sat watching the greenish trace on the huge oscilloscope screen. It was an intricate set of convolutions, looking more like a plate of spaghetti than anything else. He wondered how many frequencies were involved. Several thousand, at the very least. Fraser, repeated Kennedy softly into the ear of the hypnotized man. Colin Fraser. Colin Fraser. He touched a dial with infinite care. Colin Fraser. The oscilloscope flickered as he readjusted. A new trace appeared. Kennedy waited for a while and then, Robert Kennedy, Sentiment Inc. Robert Kennedy, Sentiment Inc. Robert Kennedy, Sentiment. He turned off the machine. Its murmur and glow died away. Facing Fraser was a tight little smile. He said, "All right. Your job is done. Are we even now?" "As even as we'll ever get, I suppose," said Fraser. "I wish you'd trust me," said Kennedy with a hint of wistfulness. "I'd have done the job honestly. You didn't have to watch." "Well, I was interested," said Fraser. "Frankly, I still don't see what you stand to gain by the dog-like devotion of this Ferris. He's rich, but he's too weak and short-sighted to be a leader. I'd never planned on conditioning him for my purposes." "I've explained that," said Fraser patiently. "Ferris is a large stockholder in a number of corporations. His influence can swing a lot of business my way." "Yes, I know, and I didn't grant your wish blindly, you realize. I had Ferris studied. He's unable to harm me." Kennedy regarded Fraser with hard eyes. "And just in case you still have foolish notions, please remember that I gave him the father conditioning with respect to myself. He'll do a lot for you, but not if it's going to hurt me in any way." "I know when I'm licked," said Fraser bleakly. "I'm getting out of town as soon as I finish those courses I'm signed up for." Kennedy snapped his fingers. "All right, Ferris, wake up now." Ferris blinked. "What's been happening?" he asked. "Nothing much," said Kennedy, unbuckling the electrodes. "I've taken my readings, and thank you very much for your help, sir. I'll see that you get due credit when my research is published." "Ah, yes. Ferris puffed himself out. Then he put an arm around Fraser's shoulder. "If you aren't busy," he said, "maybe we could go have lunch." "Thanks," said Fraser. "I'd like to talk about a few things." He lingered for a moment after Ferris had left the room. "I imagine this is goodbye for us," he said. "Well, so long at least. We'll probably hear from each other again." Kennedy shook Fraser's hand. "No hard feelings? I did go to a lot of trouble for you. Wangling your introduction to Ferris when you'd named him, and having one of my men persuade him to come here. And right when I'm so infernally busy, too." "Sure," said Fraser. "It's all right. I can't pretend to love you for what you've done, but you aren't a bad sort." "No worse than you," said Kennedy with a short laugh. "You've used the machine for your own ends now." "Yeah," said Fraser. I guess I have." Swirsky asked, "Why do you insist on calling me from drugstores? And why at my office? I've got a home phone, you know." "I'm not sure but that our own lines are tapped," said Fraser. "Kennedy's a smart cookie, and don't you forget it. I think he's about ready to dismiss me as a danger, but you're certainly being watched. You're on his list." Yeah, God, you're getting a persecution complex. Honest, Colin, I'm worried. Well, bear with me for a while. Now, have you had any information on Kennedy since I called last? No. I did mention to Thompson, as you asked me to, that I'd heard rumors of some revolutionary encephalographic techniques and would be interested in seeing the work. Why did you want me to do that? Thompson, said Fraser, is one of Kennedy's men. Now look, Jim. Before long, you're going to be invited to visit Kennedy. He'll give you a spiel about his research and ask to measure your brainwaves. I want you to say yes. Then, I want to know the exact times of the 3 appointments he'll give you. The first 2, at least. If Kennedy's doing what you claim... Jim, it's a necessary risk, but I'm the one who's taking it. You'll be okay, I promise you. Though perhaps later you'll read of me being found in the river. You see, I got Kennedy to influence a big stock owner for me. One of these lesser companies in which he has a loud voice as messenger. I don't suppose Kennedy knows that. I mean, I hope not. Swirsky looked as if he'd been sandbagged. He was white, and the hand that poured a drink shook. Lord, he muttered. Lord, Colin, you were right. Fraser's teeth drew back from his lips. You went through with it, eh? Yes. I let the sun hypnotize me, and afterward I walked off with a dreamy expression as you told me to. Just 3 hours ago, he dropped around here in person. He gave me a long rigmarole about the stupidity of military secrecy and how the Soviet Union stands for peace and justice. I hope I acted impressed. I'm not much of an actor. You don't have to be, just so you didn't overdo it. To one of Kennedy's victims, obeying his advice is so natural that it doesn't call for any awestruck wonderment. And he wanted data from me. Bombardment, cross-sections, critical values, resonance levels. My lord, if the Russians found that out through spies, it'd save them 3 years of research. This is an FBI case, all right. No, not yet. Fraser laid an urgent hand on Swirsky's arm. You've stuck by me so far, Jim. Go along a little further. What do you want me to do? Why, Fraser's laugh jarred out. Give him what he wants, of course. Kennedy looked up from his desk, scowling. All right, Fraser, he said. You've been a damned nuisance, and it's pretty patient of me to see you again, but this is the last time. What do you want? It's the last time I'll need to see you, perhaps. Fraser didn't sit down. He stood facing Kennedy. You've had it, friend, straight up. What do you mean? Kennedy's hand moved toward his buzzer. Listen, before you do anything, said Fraser harshly. I know you tried to bring Jim Swirsky under the influence. You asked him for top-secret data. A few hours ago, you handed the file he brought you on to Bryce, who's no doubt at the Amtorg offices this minute. That's high treason, Kennedy. They execute people for doing that. The psychologist slumped back. Don't try to have your bully boys get rid of me, said Fraser. Swirsky is sitting by the phone, waiting to call the FBI. I'm the only guy who can stop him. But, Kennedy's tongue ran around his lips. But he committed treason himself. He gave me the papers. Fraser grinned. You don't think those were authentic, do you? I doubt if you'll be very popular in the Soviet Union either, once they've tried to build machines using your data. Kennedy looked down at the floor. How did you do it? He whispered. Remember Ferris? The guy you fixed up for me? He owns a share of your next-door neighbor, the Messenger Advertising Service. I fed him a song and dance about needing an office to do some important work, only my very whereabouts had to be secret. The Messenger people were moved out without anybody's knowing. I installed myself there one night, and also a simple little electric oscillator. Ensophiliography is a damn delicate work. It involves amplifications up to several million. The apparatus misbehaves if you give it a hard look. Naturally, your lab and the machine were heavily shielded. But even so, a radio emitter next door would be bound to throw you off. My main trouble was in lousing you up just a little bit. Not enough to make you suspect anything. I only worked at that during your calibrating sessions with Swirsky. I didn't have to be there when you turned the beam on him, because it would be calculated from false data and be so far from his pattern as to have no effect. You told me yourself how precise an adjustment was needed. Swirsky played along. Now we've got proof. Not that you meddled with human lives, but that you're a spy. Kennedy sat without moving. His voice was a broken mumble. I was going to change the world. I had hopes for all humankind, and you for the sake of one woman. I never trusted anybody with a messiah complex. The world is too big to change single-handed. You just have bungled it up worse than it already is. A lot of dictators started out as reformers and ended up as mass executioners. You'd have done the same. Fraser leaned over his desk. I'm willing to make a deal, though, he went on. Your teeth are pulled. There's no point in turning you in. Swirsky and Martinez and I are willing to report on Bryce and let you go, if you'll change back all your subjects. We're going to read your files and watch and see that you do it. Every single person. Kennedy bit his lip. And the machine? I don't know. We'll settle that later. Okay, God, here's the phone number of Judy Harkness. Ask her to come over for a special treatment at once. A month later, the papers had a story about a plausible maniac who had talked his way into the Columbia University laboratories, where Gavotti's puzzling machine was being studied, and pulled out a hammer and smashed it into ruin before he could be stopped. Taken to jail, he committed suicide in his cell. The name was Kennedy. Fraser felt vague regret, but it didn't take him long to forget it. He was too busy making plans for his wedding.
Short Transmissions was created by Heather Johnson Yu, produced and edited by Rachel Emerson, music by Molly Walburn, brought to you by Edgeworks Nebula. Tune in next week for the next episode of Short Transmissions.
Edgeworks Nebula.